Welcome. In this session, our goal is to help you elevate your communication and response skills as a second referee. So let's get right to it. Most of us have a basic routine when it comes to preparing for a match. We help our partner check the court and game equipment to make sure they're ready. We have a pre-match conference with our support crew so that we're smooth and efficient during the match. And we work with coaches to ensure rosters and lineups are submitted timely and accurately. When play begins, we watch the receiving team for overlaps during the serve, and during the rally, we're focusing on the net and center line plays. During dead ball periods, we handle substitutions and timeouts. But our role as a second referee is evolving as the sport and its participants advance their skills and knowledge. Not only do we need to be masters of the rules and our responsibilities, we also need to be good communicators. The rule book and officials manual don't give us much guidance when it comes to interpersonal communication skills or de-escalation techniques. So that's what we'll focus on in this session. First, let's start with what the rule book and officials manual provide us. Rule 5, Section 5 covers the second referee responsibilities. As we read through these rules, we find they don't say anything about how we should communicate. The only communication guidelines are about notifying coaches of the number of substitutions and timeouts they've used. There's nothing about handling the more challenging match situations, like the ones that require good interpersonal communication skills and de-escalation techniques. The Casebook and Officials Manual provides a little more for us. Here's a case that ventures into the match management and communication skills area. During play, the R2 notices the coach of Team S, A, repeatedly approaches the court closer than 6 feet, and B, stands beyond the end line outside the replacement zone, but no closer than 6 feet to the court. After a verbal warning, the R2 requests an unnecessary delay administrative yellow card for both A and B, and the ruling is that this is the correct procedure. Did you notice there aren't any specifics about how the R2 might give that verbal warning and what the R2 might say in that situation? Let's take a look at another. Team R's coach stands at the bench to greet a replaced player and continues to provide instructions to players on the court. The R2 notices the coach is outside the libero replacement zone and in the substitution zone. The ruling is this is a warning, a yellow card being administered by the R1 for minor unsporting conduct. The scorer records the card in the comments section of the score sheet. And the comment to follow up is that preventive officiating might avoid the need for a card. Note the comment at the end about preventive officiating and how it could have helped, but no specific suggestions are offered for this situation. The verbal warning mentioned in the previous situation could fall under preventive officiating, but referees, especially lesser experienced ones, might be left wondering when to use a verbal warning and how to implement preventive officiating techniques. The National Federation Volleyball Officials Manual offers some guidance, so let's also take a look there. Section C of the Volleyball Officials Manual suggests some preventive officiating options, and Section F provides guidance for unsporting conduct. But neither offers much about match management and facilitation, or more importantly, communication skills and techniques. There's a reason these kinds of specifics are omitted. It's because they fall into the gray area. We're all different when it comes to communication styles, interpersonal skills, and response techniques. These are some of the most important parts of a second referee's work, and we're left to our own devices to develop them. What works for one referee may not work for another. What you say to a coach may not work for another referee with that same coach, and vice versa. Remember, each situation is unique and nearly impossible to duplicate. The teams, coaches, your officiating partners, the match score, and the personalities involved will seldom be the same. All these things influence how we need to communicate in each situation. In this gray area, where there are no written rules or guidelines, offers an opportunity for us to evaluate and elevate our on-court skills. So don't hide from opportunities. Some second referees will duck behind the net post, hoping to avoid personal interaction with a coach who might be a little agitated. Do you have confidence in your rules knowledge and can use the right verbiage to clarify a call? Maybe you don't necessarily agree with the on-court decision and you want to separate yourself from that situation. Or you might not understand the R1's decision and don't feel comfortable trying to explain it. And of course, nobody likes to be yelled at, so trying to avoid that situation might be at the top of your list. Let's spend some time getting over these bumps in the road and learn to seek the opportunities these personal interactions can offer. It'll elevate your skills. It starts with being an active participant on the officiating crew. Do all the things prescribed in the rulebook and officials manual, but don't stop there. Learn the best ways to communicate and try to de-escalate precarious situations. Stepping back and spectating while a coach yells across the court at your R1 partner will do little to elevate your status as a referee. On the contrary, stepping up and addressing a question or concern may shine a positive light on you, if you do it right. As we mentioned earlier, the role of the second referee is evolving. There was a time when sports officials were viewed as the law enforcement for a sport. Some officials seem to have internalized that perception and they became strict and inflexible in their approach to officiating. But that's not where we are today. Over the past few years, the culture has changed. Sports officials are viewed, especially by the participants, as more of a game manager than a police officer. We can still surely learn a little bit about communication from our law enforcement friends, particularly de-escalating tense situations. First, let's identify the pieces, the critical elements in a match that impact your opportunities to elevate your skills. Game awareness, listening skills, empathy, response skills, and self-awareness. Let's take a brief look at each of these. In short, game awareness means knowing what just happened. If a coach asks for a clarification of what just happened on the court, have an answer other than, I didn't see it. Challenge yourself to broaden your court awareness so you can answer confidently. Yes, there will be times that during a match you were focused at the net and couldn't see what happened deeper in the court. But if the R1 blows the whistle, you should have a general idea what happened once you see their fault signal. Which rules apply and how are they applied? The ability to quickly recall the rules in casebook situations that apply to a given scenario will gain you credibility, so study the rules. Who? Who as in which player, or who as in who made the call? The line judge, maybe the R1. Sometimes there's uncertainty about where in the rally the fault occurred, or sometimes a quick signal from a line judge will be missed by the teams. A coach may ask for a clarification, so be ready for it. And remember, don't place blame on your partner or a line judge. Simply clarify which crew member had the information on which the call was based. When and where? When or where during the rally did the fault occur? For any number of reasons, there could be a late whistle during play. This may lead to confusion by the teams, and an alert second referee will be ready to quickly explain when and where the fault took place. Listening is a learned skill. We're often anxious to defend a call or decision, and we can't wait to get those words out of our mouth. As a result, we don't listen to what is being said by a coach or even one of our officiating crew members. The old adage says we have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we listen twice as much as we speak. Let that sink in. Don't assume you know what's going to be asked, questioned, or stated. The Dalai Lama once said, "When you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new." By listening more intently, we can learn about a coach's perspective. That doesn't mean we have to agree, but understanding their perspective shows we have empathy. Speaking of empathy, Our job is more than rules knowledge, crisp signals, and sharp mechanics. Officiating requires us to have people skills, and empathy is an important attribute. Try to understand a coach's or player's perspective. Do they feel they've been done wrong by our decision, or are they protecting their team? We always say that coaches want it called on the opposing setter, but not their setter. That's because they're protecting her. The team can't afford for the setter to get in her own head and lose confidence. So they question us to let the setter know her coach is on her side. The stakes of a match are sometimes outside the realm of our information. We don't always know when a coach or player is on the verge of a milestone, maybe win-loss records, the 1,000 kills club or 1,000 blocks club. We don't know what kind of pressure the school administrators or parents nowadays, how much pressure they're putting on the coach. Maybe the team hasn't won or lost a set all season. Maybe they've never beaten this particular opponent or lost to them. All of these emotional aspects of the game will play into the whole communication dynamic of the match. And that communication dynamic requires some self-awareness. What message are we sending? Image is very important. How do you present yourself? It starts when you walk into the gym. Your appearance is important, and it will impact how your communication is received throughout the match. So always look sharp and professional. Does your body language express certainty or uncertainty? Do you slouch or stand upright? Do you find yourself nodding or shaking your head on unorthodox plays or unusual ball contacts? How does your body outwardly react when you're frustrated? Be aware of these things and try to minimize them because they send a message. Face coverings have forced us to read body language and facial expressions. As a result, eye communication has become super important. What can you say with your eyes? Do your raised eyebrows ask a question? Do you squint when you disagree or have doubt? Does a cocked eyebrow come across as a scoff? Crow's feet might reveal your smile beneath a mask. Be aware of your facial expressions and body language. You wouldn't want a coach or player to think of you as our friend the grumpy cat here now, would you? Speaking of facial expressions and eye communication, take a look at these three pictures. Even with a mask, we can tell this guy's furrowed brow shows some anger. This woman's raised eyebrows and wide eyes reveal a surprised look. And we can see from this fellow's eyes that he's smiling. And even if you aren't wearing a face mask, your eyes may reveal your thoughts. Now let's talk about response skills. First, a few key concepts. There's a time to listen. We just covered quite a bit about listening. What we hear dictates how we respond. There's a time to ignore. Ignore statements such as, "You missed that one." Probably doesn't need a response as long as the comment ends there. There's a time to respond. And when it comes time to respond, we need to be clear and concise and use rules verbiage whenever that's appropriate. There's a time to sanction. Sometimes, despite our best efforts to diffuse a situation, a conduct sanction may become necessary. We'll talk more about this a little bit later. And there's a time to move on. The final part of responding is knowing when to get the match moving again, when the conversation is over. And we'll share some tips on this in a little while too. Going back to the beginning of this segment, we said we could learn a little bit from law enforcement about communication skills. So let's talk about a type of response skill in which law enforcement officers are trained. It's called de-escalation techniques. There are plenty of de-escalation techniques out there. Consider doing some online research on the topic. While many techniques are situational, there are some that seem to fit well with sports officiating. Be mindful that you don't enter a conversation with a harsh or hard tone. Keep your voice low and soft. When the coach recognizes that you are calm, they'll be inclined to take their own emotions down a notch. Tense situations can bring about a fight or flight reaction in our bodies, and your body language and facial expressions can show this. Try to maintain neutral body language. For example, don't put your hands on your hips or cross your arms in front of your chest. Remain open and non-judgmental. When it comes to listening, answer questions, not statements. Nod when appropriate. This is a mental release and will help us not interrupt. Plus, it shows we have some understanding of the coach's perspective. Tilt your head to the side like lending an ear. This can show you're actively listening. Once a question or concern has been expressed, use clarifying statements that start with a phrase such as, "To be sure I understand," or "What I heard you say is." It's important to acknowledge the emotions and feelings the coach is expressing. Use phrases such as, "I understand," "I hear what you're saying," or "I can appreciate that." Often this acknowledgement is followed by "but." "I can appreciate that, but what we saw in that play was." And have you ever conversed with a close talker? They get too far into your personal space and it makes you want to back up. Give a coach his or her personal space, usually about an arm's length distance, but don't stand too far away, which number one can make you seem disinterested, and number two may make it hard to hear them. Now let's put our response skills to work by looking at some scenarios. For you movie buffs out there, we're going to start with a famous line from a classic Paul Newman movie, Cool Hand Luke.
What we've got here is failure to communicate.
Over the next few minutes, we hope to get you prepared so that a failure to communicate won't trip you up. There's good, bad, and ugly when it comes to response skills. We're going to start with the ugly ones first. Aggressive responses can get us into trouble. Nobody likes to be told to sit down and be quiet. Don't use that with coaches. Get out of my zone. Instead of saying these words, casually walk the coach out of the subzone as you begin your conversation. Threatening words or the perception of a threat may be perceived as a loss of control by you. If you feel the urge to say, "If you do that again, you're going to get a card," you probably should just request the card instead of giving poor behavior one more chance to rear its ugly head. So from the good, bad, ugly list, let's talk about the bad. These are the response pitfalls. "I don't know" has a lot of negative connotations. You'll likely hear, "Then start paying attention," or "What were you looking at?" So avoid "I don't know" as a response. Calm down. It's never going to get you very far, and I'm sure you have your own stories where telling someone calm down backfired on you. Because that's what we were told at my local meeting. This implies you were on autopilot and didn't put any thought into the call or no call. Stay away from this one. And name dropping. Starting a sentence with "so-and-so said" diminishes your credibility, just like the previous response. You are the one assigned to the match, and that means you need to take responsibility. So don't blame so-and-so. And now we can move on to the good stuff. Take a look at this photo of a second referee and a coach. How do you feel about their body language? Doesn't appear to be confrontational or agitated. It seems the R2 may be providing some information or assistance with a lineup check. Good phrases to use might be, "Let's get this fixed," "How can I help?" or "What did you see?" These last two questions are good because they're open-ended. This shows you're concerned about the coach's point of view. The NFHS Officials Manual discusses some general concepts around preventive officiating. These concepts can be applied to verbal warnings, and maybe they should be called reminders instead, since there could be a negative connotation by calling them warnings. So let's take a look at a few here. With lineups, use preventive techniques here so you don't have to assess an administrative sanction. Maybe say something like, "Hey coach, don't forget, we need your lineup soon." This gentle reminder helps set the tone. If the coach's position is the issue, hey, they're invested in their players and they're intensely focused on the game, so sometimes they forget where they're standing. A little bit of, "Hey coach, remember to stay back when the ball is in play," might take you a lot further than getting too aggressive and moving them back. And sometimes as the match progresses, assistant coaches get a little bit active. There's energy and excitement. Coaches, assistant coaches, other bench personnel need to release that energy once in a while, and they might jump up off the bench. Don't be too punitive unless there's an unsporting conduct issue. Try something like, "Hey coach, I know your assistant is excited, but remind her to stay on the bench," and do that with a smile. Speaking of coaches and their energy and excitement, this coach is imagining himself right on the court with his team. Here are a few more opportunities for verbal reminders. Let's say we've got a potential overlap. How about something like being specific? If you don't, you could cause some confusion. Make sure number 5 is behind number 7, or make sure number 9 is closer to the right sideline than number 10. Or, "Hey coach, your setter's starting to leave a little early." All of these are good phrases to use. They're specific to the coach and they can quickly fix the concern if there is one. What if you notice a player wearing jewelry during warm-ups? Of course, there's a hardline approach, which is the administrative sanction, but maybe a verbal reminder could accomplish our goal without being too punitive. How about, "Coach, number 12 is wearing earrings," or whatever piece of jewelry. "She doesn't have to take them out, but she can't participate while wearing them." Remember, telling a player she needs to remove the jewelry opens a can of worms. Instead, give options and a consequence and let them make the decision. Assertive responses are good too. In the photo, the second referee has his head slightly tilted. It's as if he's lending his ear, like we talked about earlier, while he's checking the team roster here or the lineup. This is a good technique. An assertive response is honest. Own a mistake. We're human, right? "I'm sorry, I missed that one." As long as you're not saying that too often to a coach, they'll appreciate your honesty. Be clear and confident. Be concise and direct with your words. Speak slowly and state the facts. No need for extra details. "Coach, I saw the player contact the net, but the ball had already hit the floor, so the play was dead." Take a look at this second referee speaking with a coach. How do you feel about their body language? The R2's demeanor is open and his facial expression is honest. The coach's shoulders are relaxed, his hands are at his side, and he seems to be receptive to what the R2 is saying. An assertive response deals with the problem, it doesn't dismiss it. We can speculate that's what's happening in this photo here. Acknowledging the problem with, "I hear what you're saying," is probably a little better than claiming that's not what happened. This last phrase simply implies the coach's perspective was wrong, and we just don't want to go down that road. The rules states is a great way to address a concern. Put that one in your response skills toolbox. And remember, we listen first. After you hear the coach's point of view, sometimes it might be appropriate to say what we saw and use the word "we." This is a team approach and says to the coach that you and your partner or a line judge are on the same page. Sometimes coaches direct their comments across the court to your first referee partner. Earlier in this session, we shared a picture of a child behind a flagpole. Remember this little guy? When a coach argues across the court, do you think, oh, this is going to be good, and you step back behind the net post to spectate? Remember, this is a time for you to shine. Take some heat off your partner, redirect the conversation. Phrases like, hey, coach, it's loud in here, and the R1 can't hear you. I can help. Or, hey, coach, let me try to answer your question. Referees often ask one another, what'd you say to that coach to get things calmed down? Or, what are the magic words or catchphrases that'll keep me out of trouble? To be honest, there aren't any magic words. What works for one referee may not work for another. That doesn't mean we can't pick up a few tips, but don't expect that a coach's reaction to you will be the same reaction another referee gets from that coach, or vice versa. Still, there's some tried and true responses that can work, and they're typically involving the use of rules verbiage. So let rules be your magic words. Let's look at some examples. Back row calls or no calls often elicit a reaction from a coach. Stick to rules verbiage to address back row situations. She was behind the attack line if we didn't make the call, or she was on the attack line if we did. The ball was completely above the top of the net if we made the call, or the ball was not above the top of the net. That's why we didn't make the call. Or she was reaching higher than the top of the net when she touched the ball if we've called an illegal back row block, or she was not reaching higher than the top of the net if we didn't call it. Responses can be a little more challenging when it comes to ball handling calls or no calls. Start with rules verbiage. The ball was caught or thrown, or there was prolonged contact, or the ball visibly came to rest. Sometimes a coach will react to a legal but ugly first team hit. Again, using rules verbiage, remind the coach that multiple contacts are legal on the first team hit. Then there's that standard answer when it comes to ball handling decision. Coach, it's a judgment call. Although this one should be kind of readily available for you, sometimes it's just not the best response. It's a little hollow and can be seen as a catch-all for referees to defend a questionable call. Maybe consider instead something like, Coach, from the R1's angle, the contact was not legal. And now for some of the more challenging situations. That moment when a coach's reaction or words trigger a different kind of response from you. What if the coach asks you to go talk to your partner? Sometimes you can use that trip to the stand as a de-escalation technique. It allows the coach a moment to cool down. Other times it may be the coach's delay tactic, or it may be an attempt to drive a wedge between you and your partner to get you to disagree. Be cautious with how you respond and proceed. A trip to the stand may be an option, but make sure it's appropriate. Ask yourself, can I provide a better answer if I get more information from my partner, or do I already have the information I need? What about we're getting homered? It's one of the ugliest comments a sports official will hear. It implies we're being unethical, unfair, or that we're biased. When we discussed general concepts for response skills earlier in this session, we said there's a time to listen, respond, ignore, sanction, and a time to move on. Being called a homer is a time to sanction. The degree of sanction, whether it's yellow or red, will be situational. Likewise, you guys are terrible is another trigger that should probably result in a sanction. This is a personal comment. It's not about a call or decision. It's about you. Not all personal comments deserve a sanction, but this one needs some consideration. Has a frustrated coach ever said, hey, you're missing a good game, and you wanted to respond, yeah, but they sent me to this one? Keep that thought to yourself. Sometimes what we want to say and what we should say are two very different things. This kind of comment is probably not worthy of a sanction to the coach, but it lets us know we need to perhaps step it up a bit. And a final trigger might be the use of an expletive. Referees have different tolerance levels when it comes to using bad words. Is the comment directed towards someone? Is the coach mumbling to themselves? Depending on what's said and in what context, maybe a verbal warning could work. Something like, hey coach, be mindful of your language. Finally, let's review some responses that help us end a discussion. When the discussion has gone on long enough and there isn't going to be a change in the ruling on the floor, it's time to get the match rolling again. Coach, I understand, but it's time we get back to the match. Let's play. We're human, right? Sometimes we miss a call. Acknowledge it, move on, and hey, we'll be ready for that the next time. Just make sure you are ready the next time it happens and don't miss it that second time around. And sometimes you just got to walk away. A slow walk backwards while nodding your head as the coach continues is a way to pull yourself from the conversation. It's kind of like saying, yep, okay, without the words. Once you're in position near the post, give the ready signal so your partner can get the next rally started. Let's cover a few things that may agitate the situation on the court. When a coach turns and walks away, don't give chase. Give them their personal space, let them walk away, even if you haven't finished your response. Because ultimately, that's what we wanted to end the conversation, right? And to get the match moving again. We all have friends who need to have the last word in a conversation. We know how that feels, so don't be that person when it comes to communicating with a coach. This isn't the debate club and there's no winner. And first referees never yell across the court, no matter your intentions. It won't be perceived well by anyone, and half the time they can't hear you anyway. Telling coaches they're wrong is a big faux pas, so please avoid that one as you communicate with the coaches. And lastly, a sarcastic response might work when you're joking around with a group of friends, but it doesn't work on the volleyball court. It's going to be perceived as aggressive. Don't go there. Now that we've covered lots of good stuff about response skills, let's put you to the test. We'll give you a few scenarios and some possible responses, and you pick the best one. So in this first one, the first referee calls over the net by the blocker. How do you respond? Here are your options. Coach, I didn't understand that call either. Coach, let me ask the R1. And coach, the ball never entered the vertical plane of the net, and the opponent was there to make a play on it. So this first one is clearly not an option. There are only so many situations in which over the net can be called, and it's our job to know the rules that apply. For this second one, there's really seldom a reason that you'd need to walk across the court to ask about this call. So again, knowing the applicable rules is the important part. And our third response, this one is based on the rules, and this is the one we want to go with. So check out rule 964, and that gives you what you need to know about this kind of net play. So for our next one, first referee calls illegal attack by a back row player at the attack line. The coach says, how is that a back row attack? So how do you respond? Coach, I'm still learning those rules, so I'm not really sure. Coach, the player stepped on the attack line when she contacted the ball, and the ball was completely above the top of the net. When the ball crossed the net, it's considered a completed attack. Or, Coach, I didn't see the play. Well, for this first response, while it might be true, you'll lose credibility if this is what you say. For the second response, this one sounds pretty good, right? It comes directly from the rules. And for our third response, while there's surely going to be plays you clearly don't see, second referees need to broaden their focus and see plays involving a back row player at the attack line. If this is an area of weakness for you, you got to work on it. You can look away from the net when play isn't occurring there. So our best option in this case is going to be that second answer. And you want to check out rules 954 and 955. So for our next one, the first referee calls illegal block by a back row setter at the net. The coach says she wasn't blocking. So how do you respond? Coach, I'm not sure about this one. Or Coach, it didn't look like she was blocking to me either. Or Coach, the ball entered the plane of the net where either team has a right to play it. Your setter is reaching higher than the top of the net and touched the ball simultaneously with the opposing player. By rule, this is an illegal block by your setter. Now, again, for this first one, it's really not a good option. As officials, we need to see the plays and know the applicable rules. For the second one, this type of response is based on a lack of rules knowledge. So meeting the definition of being a blocker doesn't necessarily mean being in a blocking action. And we have to know the difference of that based on the rules, the difference in that based on the rules verbiage. And this third one, this is where we want to be with our response. Using the phrase by rule gives us credibility in our reply. Just make sure that if you say by rule, you're quoting the rule accurately. And you can check out rule 951C in the note section to specifically refer to back row players at the net and simultaneous contact with the opposing team. So for this next one, during play, you offer 4 hits help to the R1, but the R1 does not take your assistance and allows play to continue. The coach also thinks the opposing team had 4 hits and questions you about it. So how do you respond? Coach, I offered help, but the R1 didn't take it. Or, Coach, the R1 is on top of the net, had a great view of that play, and he or she had a touch by your blocker. For this first one, don't throw your partner under the bus. Enough said about that, right? And the second one, even though you saw something different, you're still supporting your partner's decision. That's the route we want to go. And you can check out Rule 553A about the second referee providing assistance to the R1. In this next one, a ball is attacked by Team A and lands out of bounds. The Team A coach says a Team B player touched the ball. How do you respond? Coach, if there was a touch, the line judges missed it. No, Coach, the ball wasn't touched. Coach, we didn't see a touch. We'll work hard to get those right. Coach, I'll ask the Team B player if she touched it. For this first response, again, this is throwing your officiating crew under the bus. Don't use blame to separate yourself from the decision. For our second response, this is basically telling the coach they were wrong. And as we said earlier, nobody likes to hear that they were wrong. So don't use this one either. This third response, this is a great answer. We use the word we, and again, this is that team approach to responding, and it doesn't isolate you or anyone else on the crew. Plus, it doesn't deny the fact that the coach could be right. We're just stating that we didn't have a touch. And for our final response there, although we'd sometimes like to ask a player if she touched the ball to validate our decision, this one just is not an option. We're going to throw in one more here, and this is about a topic that is sometimes hard for second referees to address. A coach questions the R1's lack of ball handling calls early in the match. How do you respond? It's judgment. It's early in the match. Let's see where his or her line is. I'm sure he wishes he'd called that. Neither team's playing very well. We'd score more points than both teams if we call all those doubles. This first response, it's judgment. As we said earlier, this is a catch-all response and it's kind of hollow, even though it's true. Might not be the best option for us, but it's there if we need it. The second one, this is pretty good. doesn't deny the coach's point of view, and it doesn't indicate the R1's decisions have been good or bad, tight or loose. As an R2, you don't want to corner yourself and make promises for the R1 that he or she can't keep. You don't know if your partner missed one or two or whether they're going to allow teams to play more freely. So this is an open reply that gives the officiating team some room to adapt and adjust. This third response, yeah, I'm sure he wishes he'd called that one. It's humorous, yes, but appropriate, probably not. And for this fourth response, this goes back to what you'd like to say versus what you should say. Do not say this one. So our best option here is the second one. It's early in the match. Let's see where his or her line is. We'll end with some phrases you might find helpful. I understand what you're saying, but. We covered this one earlier, and it lets the coach know you hear their concern, but, and there's always a but, and that but should be followed by a short explanation why the decision was made. When a decision is questioned, you can reaffirm the call by saying, I had a pretty good look at it, or it could be he or she if it was a line judge or the first referee who made the decision or the call. Using pretty good in this reply, it kind of softens the delivery just a bit. It suggests you aren't infallible, but you saw what happened and you're confident in the decision. To show agreement with your partner or line judge, consider saying, that's how I saw it too. And again, this reaffirms the call and indicates that more than one person on the crew had the same perspective. Although some trips across the court to converse with the R1 shouldn't be used excessively, sometimes it's necessary. And if that's the best way to get the right answer for a coach, use let me check and head across the court. And finally, since we aren't infallible, it's probably better to say you didn't see the fault instead of saying it didn't happen. For example, at the end of the rally, the coach believes you missed a net fault by the opponent. Instead of saying, Coach, there was no net fault, it might be better to say, I didn't see a net touch there, Coach, but I'll be sure to watch for those. And with that, let's wrap up. Start your evolution as a second referee. Seek communication opportunities during the match. Show empathy. Listen to what's being said to you. Always be honest in your responses and know your limits and your triggers. And most importantly, respond to coaches with respect. Thanks for joining our session and have a fantastic season.